Welcome to the show. Today we are going back in history to the days of gunslingers and outlaws, legendary names like Jesse James, Billy the Kid, Butch and Sundance. Now, one of Waco's names you may know is Six Shooter Junction, so I was especially interested in this brand new book by BRYAN BURROUGH, The Gunfighters, and I am so happy to say he is here with us.
Hey,
BRYAN, welcome
thank you.
to the show, and also the wonderful Coleman Hampton, who is the executive director of the Bell County Museum. You've known BRYAN for a while, and this was kind of the connection that we had. You said, Ann, you need to talk to BRYAN BURROUGH.
Yes, Brian has been a friend of the museum and a friend of mine for 7 or 8 years. We've talked about the book for several years. He didn't give me any inside information, but I knew that he has been working and researching it, and I've just had a feeling, knowing Brian as a writer and knowing the subject, that it was going to be a huge amount of interest around this. So I wanted to give you a heads up that Brian might be in town and that he would be a good person to have on the Ann Harder show.
Well, and you just have had tremendous success already with the Gunfighters and that Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Texas Monthly. We can just go down the list of major outlets that love this book and wanted to write about it.
You know, I've been doing this 35 years now, and I kind of thought this would be a book that the major publications might be able to ignore. You know, it's about the Old West. I don't live in New York anymore. I live out here. And son of a gun, the amount of attention that it's gotten has been among the most surprising things in my 35-year career. It's been nice.
Well, now, I think I read where you've been thinking about this book for 20 years.
And I got
thinking about writing it kind of as a prequel to your book, Public Enemies, about Depression era criminals, which would make sense.
Yeah, some people may remember I wrote a book called Public Enemies about Depression era bank robbers, John Dillinger, Bonnie and Clyde. Most people will know it probably from the movie that
Sure.
Michael Mann and Johnny Depp made out of it. And back then in 2005, yeah, I wanted to write this book because if you've already gone back to look at gun-toting bad guys in the 1930s, it almost feels like an unfinished story if you don't look at the only other period before that in American history where similar things were going on. At the time, my editor said, "Nuh-uh."
Really?
Yeah, he said, there's no way to tell this as one story. You're going to end up writing one more of these books that's 17 chapters on 17 guys. And that's really not the type of book that you want to do. So it took me about 12, 13 years to come up with a way to tell the entire story. This book is the first narrative history of what I'm calling the gunfighter era from 1865 to 1901. And it takes in essentially every gunfighter you've ever heard of
And some you haven't heard
from
of.
Wild Bill Hickok
Yeah.
to John Wesley Hardin and that's the fun of it. And that's, bringing in the lesser known people who
Yeah.
are fun to rediscover.
Yeah, well, I think what struck me as I'm getting into the book is the nuances into the culture of Texas and how the period after the Civil War, how it all kind of racism, all these different social aspects went into the development of the Western gunfighter. Never thought of it.
You know, I hadn't really either, but if you look at it, we're still talking 150 years later about a series of gunfights that happened on the old Western frontier.
Yeah.
We're not talking about gun violence in Boston and Baltimore. We're not talking about Canada. We're not talking about Australia. We're talking about something that happened in a specific place and time. So the question became, at least part of the question, the fun of it was for me was finding out why. And it turned out that Texas had an awful lot to do with it.
Yeah, and you say that rightly so, that Texas is west, part of the West, and it's part of the South.
Yeah.
And so what does all that mean? What did you glean from that?
Well, the first thing I noticed as I started kind of cataloging these marquee gunfights, those that made it into the history books, and this is no BS, like 40, 50, 60% of these feature a Texan on one the other. And that's not just the major gunfights in Texas, which were probably a third of all the major gunfights in the West, but in Kansas, in New Mexico, in Arizona, in Wyoming, all the places that Texas cowboys and Texas cattle were herded. So that ended up being a big part of my research was how Texas and Texans, Texas outlaws, Texas cattlemen, influenced so many of the most famous gunfights, from OK Corral to so many of the gunfights in the Kansas cow towns like Dodge City. That Dodge City, that became the Madison Square Garden of the gunfighter era.
Well, and you think about the gunfight, I never really had kind of thought of it in terms of the duel, and that's kind of the Southern thing where two gentlemen have a dispute and so paces and you talk about some of the famous duels that happened.
Well, I wanted to know
in the
where
East.
I wanted to know where this whole idea of gunfighting came from.
Yeah.
It seemed to come out of nowhere. And really the only place you can find it any place before was in the antebellum South, in the dueling culture where men would challenge each other to duels. And while the formal structure of a duel kind of fell away once it went out west, what you do see is a whole complex of male honor codes that originate and develop in the antebellum South that spread through Texas and then really all go across the West. The idea that in the South, and to an extent on the Old West frontier, and certainly in Texas, a man's honor was the way he was measured in society. And the idea of these codes, one of the relevant point is, if somebody challenged your honor, you were obliged to defend yourself with force if necessary, and even with deadly force. And that was something that rose in the South, that became a very big deal in Texas, and became, I think, kind of the most important reason for the spread of these gunfights.
Now you're talking about the Code of the West.
Right. That's
Yeah.
the male honor code of the South. I'm arguing here, and this isn't a big academic
Yeah.
book, but I think I'm on to something. I'm arguing developed into what people ended up calling the Code of the West,
Yeah. Have to have a weapon though.
and almost everybody did.
So let's talk about that. The role of the Samuel Colt at age 17 dreaming up a new kind of revolver.
Well, the idea of linking Texans and revolver-based gunfighter violence,
Yeah.
I'm certainly not the first person to bring that up. Colt invented the revolver, first came out right after the Alamo in 1836, and nobody cared. It was the first gun, instead of just pow and reload, that you could fire 6 times. And it was the Texas Rangers, as students of Texas history may know, that suddenly discovered these revolvers left behind by the Texas Navy, of all things, and used them against the Comanche. And it was a young ranger named Samuel Walker who went back east to work with Colt to come up with the first real 6-shooter that came to define gun violence in the Old West. So Texans from the very beginning were highly identified, and rightly so, with the Colt revolver, which revolutionized personal violence in America and on the Western frontier.
Yeah. Of course, the media, meaning newspapers, books, later Hollywood, really, what kind of a role did all that play into our general understanding of gunfighters?
Originally less than you think.
Really?
Gunfights were covered as news stories in the Old West, but there wasn't a lot of hubbub about it. Yeah, some guys shot each other, fine. It wasn't really until 50 years later, during the 1920s, when there was one of these periodic waves advanced the idea of gunfighters as this kind of American archetype that would kind of dominate our entertainments as it came to, really started with Hollywood films from the 1920s. If you go back and look at the popular culture back in the 1800s, when the gunfighters were walking the land, gunfighters were not that big a thing. What was the thing was cowboys, Indian fighters, detectives even. The idea of the gunfighter is this thing that you see in so many TV shows and so many movies. It really only broke out on American television during the 1950s, where something like a quarter of all television shows were set in the Old West.
Yeah, I grew up on them. Gunsmoke, Paladin, Have Gun Will Travel.
Cheyenne, the Rifleman. Oh, yeah.
Oh, the Rifleman.
And almost every gunfighter, I mean, from Johnny Ringo to Wyatt Earp to Jesse James, they all got their own shows for a few years.
Yeah. Well, you do delve into a lot of these individuals, and we're going to talk about them through the rest of the show. Now, you called John Wesley Hardin the killing machine. By the time he was 18, he'd killed up to 24 men.
Well, John Wesley Hardin, of course, is the most famous of the Texas gunfighters. He may have killed more men than anyone in the West, and somewhere between 25 and 42. And we should define our terms. By gunfighter, we're talking about civilian gun violence, not involving Native Americans, not involving soldiers. So this is purely civilian violence. And John Wesley Hardin rose in Texas as a teenager after the Civil War, and he was the classic thing that you saw on TV, a young man who wandered the West, or in this case wandered Texas, and just found himself in a lot of situations where he ended up using a gun on somebody. And the funniest thing about Hardin, it's not funny, is that he was so young. He killed probably between 25 and 30 people before he was 18. And by the time he was 21, when he was largely done, the number was probably more around 35 or 40. He was a soldier in his own private war who thought Texas had been taken over by carpetbaggers and Yankees, and he was going to kind of do his own to right it. And, there are a lot of latter-day movies and even popular songs that kind of celebrate Hardin. Johnny Cash sang a couple of songs about him. Heck, Bob Dylan did a whole album about him in 1967. And the fact is, Hardin, he was pretty much of a maniac.
Sounds like Psycho, yeah.
I mean, he was literally a serial killer. He didn't look for people to kill, but he
just got in his way, I guess.
He took one ride up the trail to Kansas, to Abilene, and killed, by most counts, 8 people in 3 months, including a man, a Texas rancher, that he shot through the wall of his hotel room.
Oh.
And so the great legend about Hardin is that he killed the man for snoring. And for 100 years, people have been saying something oh, right, sure, he killed a man snoring. But I'm sorry, I look at that. Why else do you shoot somebody through the wall of a hotel room at 4 a.m? I believe snoring.
I remember reading that story in your book. Yeah. And now, Wild Bill Hickok, you call America's first celebrity gunfighter.
It's a funny thing. I'm taking this period and calling it the gunfighter era in part because you can point to a first gunfight. No, not literally the first gunfight, but the first gunfight that gained national attention because it got described in a national magazine named Harper's. And it happened in 1865 in Springfield, Missouri. 2 guys in a duel across the town square, and the one who survived was Wild Bill Hickok. He thus became the first celebrated gunfighter. The most notable thing about Hickok is that he was more or less a complete fraud. This first article, which went viral, as they say today, claimed that he had killed over 100 white men, when by my count, the actual number at the time would appear to be closer to 2. So he was a big talker. The funny thing about Hickok is that as his career went on, as he found work as a sheriff, as a city marshal in places like Abilene, he did a good job of growing into that legend. He became a notable gunfighter, but he didn't start off as one.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of funny, too, how he got the name Wild Bill.
Remind me?
Because of his nose or something.
That was his nickname, Duck Bill.
Duck Bill,
His nose was so long, one guy who he ended up killing called him
might have deserved
called
it.
him Duck Bill. He did deserve it. He was a bad fella.
Oh man! Well, we've got a lot more that we're gonna be talking about. But one thing I want to just kind of go off down a little rabbit hole, and that's feuds.
Right.
Let's talk about some of these famous feuds.
Well, look, for a gunfight to be notable, you're generally dealing with some type of extrajudicial behavior, right? Something that's not quite within the law. Either 2 guys shooting each other, an outlaw and a sheriff. I mean, there's a lot of different ways this can happen, and mostly it's singular. But when a gunfight has a bunch of people, we call it a feud. And, you know, I had always thought of feuds as being an Appalachian thing because of
Yeah,
the
really.
Hatfields
And the
versus
McCoys, yeah,
It
right.
turns out, like, of the 10 deadliest American feuds, 7 or 8 happened in the Old West. 5 of them happened in Texas. And even the ones that didn't happen in Texas had a lot of Texans involved. That I'd never understood. A lot of it was in that decade, the violent decade in Texas after the Civil War. Several in North and East Texas were essentially people rising up against federal occupation. So they were called feuds. You could just as easily have called them small rebellions. And then later, with the rise of the cattle business, which of course had originated on the coastal plains below San Antonio. After the war, it grew explosively, much of it into central Texas. And unfortunately there, cattlemen came into contact with a bunch of people that didn't understand not to mess with them. And so you got this explosion of violence, so much so that you had entire counties engulfed by feuds. Lampasas County, my favorite one was in Mason County, where in 1875, 1876, it was called the Hoodoo War. Hoodoo being local slang for masked vigilantes who did a lot of the killing. And most of these feuds were essentially cattlemen versus cattle thieves, rustlers. And
Yeah, you think about the guy with the kerchief around his face. Is
yeah,
that
like
what
the
you're talking about?
like
Yeah.
the Texas Tech mascot.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it had to come from someplace.
That's safe to say here in Waco.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
that's
can get
where
away.
you're
You can get away with it here. Yeah, we had the Rangers Hall of Fame here.
That's
And
right.
I should have given more love to the. I mean, I give serious love to the Rangers, but I don't really go into a lot of the individual Rangers as I might have.
Well, you know, and we want to talk more about that and how all of this, you know, had to do also with the rise of law enforcement in a pretty much lawless part of the world, for just by virtue of the geography and everything else. I mean,
One of the kind of sub themes of the book that you see is the professionalism and the evolution of law out west. You know, early on in the late 1860s and 1870s, there weren't a lot of lawmen, and a lot of gunfights happened. We hear about them. They don't make newspapers. There weren't a lot of newspapers. And, you know, when you look at the type of lawmen that were obliged to give chase to Jesse James, to Billy the Kid, and to John Wesley Hardin, nobody's going into a Hall of Fame among that bunch. But what you see is, as you get to the 1880s and especially the 1890s, you see real professionalism. And among the first, certainly the first notable law enforcement group in the West with Texas Rangers,
Sure.
reintroduced in the mid 1870s. And then you saw some talented sheriffs begin to rise up in Kansas, chief among them Wyatt Earp, and really that they introduced a type of professionalism that over the next 15 or 20 years did a lot to begin to eliminate these types of gunfights and feuds.
yeah. Well, you mentioned Jesse James, and you said you were a little bit ambivalent about even including him in the book because well, first of all, you said he wasn't a great shot.
No.
When you expect him to be pretty much dead-eyed. And that when he died as a murderer, not a gunfighter.
Yeah, I included Jesse James in the book against my own instincts because to me, he was not an Old West gunfighter. He was a Midwestern bank and train robber. He robbed things in Minnesota and Missouri and Tennessee. Come on.
Yeah.
That's not the Old West. But I gave in and and I have a chapter on Jesse James because it feels gunfighter adjacent. And mostly because readers are expecting it. If
Yeah.
you're going to put out a book that is an entirely new reappraisal of all the famous gunfighters you've ever heard of, it feels empty if it doesn't have Jesse James. But you're right. In the end, he was not much of a shot. He rarely, when he did shoot people, and there's probably killed, off the top of my head, 5 or 8 people, they were almost shot in the head in cold blood.
Just assassinated them.
Yeah, but typically bank officers who said no to him, and he got mad and just shot him. So, yeah, so he's not exactly, in terms of his use of guns, there wasn't a lot of chivalry.
Yeah. My husband's from a little town south of St. Louis, and when we would drive to Missouri, he would always, over the years, go, I think this part of Missouri is where Jesse James is from. And so I always have heard about that. Yeah, we talk about this decade, this really deadly decade following the Civil War. The Galveston Daily News reported in December of 1876 there have been more men killed in Texas in the last year than she lost during the late war.
Yeah, it was amazing. And you can go back and find academics who studied, homicide rates and number of people and violence, extrajudicial violence, who have written that the numbers in Texas in the decade after the Civil War suggest that Central Texas in that period may have been the single most violent place in all of American history, outside wars, of course. And that it was the explosion of that violence across the rest of the Western frontier, as that really created the conditions for so much of the violence I write about. Texans don't have a monopoly on gun violence in the Old West. I don't want to suggest that. They weren't everywhere. But what I'm arguing in the book is that Texans were much more important to the spread of that violence than we understand or remember today.
Mm-hmm. And it did move further west to New Mexico, and so we're going to talk more about that when we come back after the break. Stay with us. Lots more to hear about these gunfighters who made Texas and the West wild. Stay with us.
If I've learned anything in the last year, it's that to show up as my best, I need to make intentional choices. And that goes back to the absolute basics. Number one, it's I have to move. And number two, to stay hydrated.
I have been using molecular hydrogen from Water and Wellness to support my health and well-being. It helps with energy, recovery, liver health, and more. The hydrogen has been a game-changing addition to my own wellness routine. The tablets dissolve into my water and deliver powerful minerals to help my body feel its best all day long.
Escape into fitness with the Schwinn IC4 bike, providing a premium, heart-pumping indoor cycling experience that combines digital connectivity with superior Schwinn quality. The IC4's smooth, quiet ride features magnetic resistance with 100 micro-adjustable resistance levels. Escape the everyday with the Schwinn IC4 bike, your ticket to a life well lived.
I thoroughly enjoyed Bryan Burroughs' book on the gunfighters. Check it out. Today's show is brought to you by Main Event Waco. Coming up, music by Calamity Janes. Stay with us.
At Mapiful, we believe in celebrating your journey, past, present, and future. Our unique personalized products are designed to boost your confidence, elevate creativity, and honor what matters most. From custom home decor to meaningful gifts, we help you cherish the memories that make you who you are. Visit mapiful.com and start celebrating your story today.
Today's show is brought to you by Main Event Entertainment Center. They've got it all. They've got bowling, virtual reality, laser tag, billiards, shuffleboard, and more. And if you mention my name, Ann Harder, when you're booking, you get double arcade play free. Fourth, your guest of honor will play free. For your next main event, it's Main Event, 2420 Creekview Drive in Waco, right next to the Cinemark Theaters. And welcome back. We are talking to Bryan Burrough, author of The Gunfighters, How Texas Made the West Wild, and Coleman Hampton, who is executive director of the Bell County Museum, known Bryan for a while. And what's your takeaway from this wonderful book, Coleman?
I think my takeaway is that the gunfighter culture and really this Central Texas and Texas area was on the frontier. We were in the frontier of the West. McLennan County, Bell County were all founded kind of in that 1850s era, about 15 years before what Bryan is identifying as the gunfighter era. In this area, although it was starting to incorporate and, cities and counties were being formed, it was still the Wild West. It was a very dangerous area, lawless, and at the end of the Civil War, there were feuds and things that were taking place that were outside of the law, and that at that time there was limited media coverage, and I think a lot of things that thankfully historians or people in their journals, I don't know all of Brian's sources, but people recorded those, and so that we're able to go back and examine it today.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting if you look at Texas, starting in the east with Nacogdoches, that Anglo civilization slowly moving across the west, and you have Central Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth, Waco, Bell County, Belton and Temple, that and Lampasas, that it was an area that was starting to grow as Texas after the Mexican-American War, but it was still very much a wild place, and it spread through the rest of the country, and then after 1901, kind of into the 20th century, became part of American mythology, and not mythology, but became part of the zeitgeist, and something that people, even today in 2025, I remember thinking a few years ago, they're really the interest. You don't see as many Western movies, and now there's almost a resurgence in that with the Taylor Sheridan films.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like the interest in the West, in the media, academia, and wonderful books like Brian has written, there's people are drawn to that reasons. But Brian, with his research, he is an incredible writer. He's an even better person, and I can attest to that for knowing him for 7 or 8 years. He just has done a fantastic job with the book, and I think really touched on something that is central to Texas, but that really is of interest to the Midwest, the entire country, and is of interest to the entire world. This period from 1865 to 1901.
Yeah,
is something that still fascinates.
It's
people.
amazing the fascination that the Old West still has, and it's not just Americans. It is all the way around the world.
Oh,
and
Germans love anything to do with Texas.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, no,
But
they do.
They totally do.
Well, of course, we love Germans. I'm part of the German migration myself.
As is my wife.
Here in Texas. Now, there's another Wild Bill, and this one is Wild Bill Longley, who confessed to killing 32 men. I know your story about him, because I'm not that familiar with him.
Well, if you accept the idea that John Wesley Hardin is the most famous Texas gunfighter, the second most famous gunfighter for the longest time was Wild Bill Longley, who kind of came out of nowhere in the mid-1870s. He was arrested for a murder or two, and then immediately confessed to like 32 others. It was quite the sensation, and it remained that way for 100 years. He was ultimately hung there in Giddings, east of Austin. But I mean, you talk about gunfighters and old Western shows in the 50s. He had one then. He was that famous. It wasn't until the 1890s, a good 120 years later, that an author who happens to be a friend of ours, a former district attorney down in Bell County named Rick Miller, wrote a biography of Longley that said basically all those killings, a bunch of BS.
Really?
That maybe he killed 4, 5, 6 people, but they were shot in the back or shot from ambush. That the man had almost no claim to being a gunfighter. I mean, he just made up killings for which there is no evidence. Said that he rode with the famous outlaw Cullen Baker. Small problem, Baker was dead that year. Already dead that year.
Oh.
So Rick Miller's book, which I am very happy to recapitulate and remind people of his research in mine, is the type of kind of myth busting that I won't say is easy to do in the Old West, but any number of gunfighters, Wild Bill Hickok being the first, Wild Bill Longley being the second, let's just say their pedestals are a bit shaky.
Yeah, well, I have to use this pull quote I took from your book about that hanging of Wild Bill Longley in Giddings in 1878, crowd of 2,000 on hand to watch. After he made a self-serving speech about all the men he was sorry he killed, a judge ordered him hanged until he was dead, dead, dead. And a few minutes later, he was.
Yeah.
Just a sample of this guy's writing. You are awesome.
I couldn't resist. It was low-hanging fruit.
Okay, Sam Bass. Now, I'm a little bit interested in Sam Bass because I did a story when I was doing Traveling Texas in Gatesville at the Coryell County Museum which is the spur capital of Texas.
Okay.
And as a museum guy, you've been there, I know.
Absolutely, yep. Spur
And
capital
tell
of
them what they
Texas.
have there. They have a reconstruction of the Coryell County jail house and inside the museum. And Sam Bass was held in that jail.
I didn't know that.
Well, and you've got to go to to the Coryell County Museum, because the term, you've heard the term I've heard my whole life, they're going to put him under the jail. Well, there actually is a 4-foot crawl space under this structure, and that's where they put him. And the reason was, what they were doing before they had this structure in Coryell County, they would just chain their arrested people. And they just chained them to a tree, and the varmints would get to them.
Yeah.
So at least they
jails were kind of came late to the frontier.
So they were able to. There was you see a trap door, and Sam Bass was under the jail, and the jailer sat there in a chair.
The earliest jails on the Old West, many of them were just holes in the ground where you could put a guy, and at least someone in a chair could sit there with a gun and watch him. I mean, it was just easier that way.
Well, he'd gotten a little trouble in a little area over there close to Gatesville, and that's why I don't know how long he was in jail, but
Sam Bass came to his end in Round Rock, and if you're driving down I-35, he's right there, Sam Bass Road on exit 253, and yet every time I run into somebody in Round Rock, and I'm like, you must know Sam Bass, the Sam Bass story. I haven't run into anybody yet who knows it.
They don't know who he is.
Sam Bass was a beloved outlaw in Texas for many years because people thought he was kind of, taking the fight to the railroads and, fighting for the common man. I'm not sure that was true, but people certainly believed it. And so that's another story, another figure that is kind of faded from our collective memory, and that I'm happy to try to reintroduce in this book.
Well, wonderful. And another one, Billy the Kid. I did a story in Hico at the Billy the Kid Museum, which you tell me now has been moved to Hamilton.
It has.
It's not even there. But the whole question was the mystery, did he really die in Fort Sumner at the hand of Pat Garrett? Or was somebody else shot? And Billy the Kid ends up dying as an old man in his 90s in Hico under the name of Brushy Bill Roberts. You don't believe that.
Stop it.
Stop it.
Hey, you're big in the Old West when people start spreading legends that you're not dead. So the most famous of the not dead bandits is Butch Cassidy.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. There are people who write books about this guy because Butch Cassidy died in South America after going down there. Remember at the end of the movie? And they never found his body, though they've dug up cemeteries. That fed this idea that Butch came back and he lived into the 1930s or something. I'd say I had forgotten the Hico guy until you brought him up, because it's pretty out there.
And this gentleman had wounds on his body, old scars that matched the wounds that
if he'd
Billy the Kid
had a bullet wound over his heart where Billy the Kid was shot and killed, then I would believe it.
As a member of the museum community, I'm going to stay out of this one.
Yeah.
But
Hey,
Anyway.
look, every small town needs a museum about something.
It made a fun TV story. I'm just saying, it made a fun little story. So, who's your favorite? I mean, I know who's your favorite child. Who's your favorite from this?
As a person, so many of them. Look, this is a book about people who shot people. So a lot of them, like John Wesley Hardin, are not the most fun guys that I'd want to go have a beer with. But the one that I think stands up and is Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp is kind of the moral center of the Old West. He has moral authority that's almost unchallenged. At a time where there's so many sheriffs who were drunk or corrupt or both, Wyatt Earp was trying to do the right thing. And he did for a long time until after his brothers got shot, one of them killed in Tombstone, and he kind of went outside the law. But I think Wyatt Earp largely lives up to his reputation, as does his longtime sidekick Masterson in Dodge City. He's another one of my favorites. He's one that everybody would like to have a beer with. He was a gregarious storyteller. In fact, he's the principal source for some of the most famous gunfighter stories. Bat Masterson is probably most notable for having the greatest post-frontier life of any of these guys. He went on for 30 years to be a sports writer in New York, befriended Teddy Roosevelt, and ended up as probably the only Old West gunfighter, this is Bat Masterson, who slept overnight in the Lincoln bedroom in the White House.
Okay. Coleman, do you have a favorite gunfighter from this tome?
You know, I don't know. I ask my daughter quite often, what's your favorite this? What's your favorite that? I tend to agree. You know, it's difficult with these men. In a way, it feels like not that we're glorifying violence, but shedding light on it. And I think that the lawman Wyatt Earp and people like Bat Masterson. I can't remember if Doc Holliday. He was
vividly, lawman adjacent.
Yeah, that those men live on, and they were certainly not perfect men themselves, but they were trying to bring order in an area that was a very difficult thing to do, and it was deadly. And the level Bryan talks about, the honor code, the code of the West, and maybe the lawmen had a code of their own, that they were going into very dangerous situations and very dangerous places, trying to create some sense of safety for the family, the men, women, and children who were there to make a living.
Yep.
And I think there's something that is just incredibly courageous and maybe more courageous than the gunfighters, bringing some sense of safety to those areas.
I was struck, and that's one of the themes that you see in a lot of movies. You know, the lonely lawman with the bad guy coming to town. You find that actually happened. In fact, the first question that people always ask me is, was the Old West actually as violent as it looks on movies and TV? And of course, beginning in the 60s, when academics kind of wanted to question everything, it was very fashionable for 50 years to say, no, the Old West wasn't that nuts. That's just Hollywood. And it's only been with kind of big data, big computer analysis that has become possible during the 21st century that people have crunched the numbers and come to realize that it's every bit as violent as Hollywood says and worse. I'm trying to remember the exact number, but I believe if a homicide rate of 9 per 1,000 is considered pretty bad, like Dodge City was 200, and the Old West as a whole averaged like 60. And so I think there's now a new appreciation that the West was, by any stretch of the imagination, incredibly homicidal.
Well, it was deadly, and you talk about the linking of the Civil War, the end of the Civil War, to this whole era, and PTSD, and these are guys that maybe saw unspeakable horrors during battle, and then they're they get through the war years, and then they make their way out west to find a life.
That is one of the things I wanted to explore, was how many of these fellows, shooting it out in the streets of Dodge City and Tombstone, had difficult experiences in the war. Yeah. And you can point to a handful, but it still remains speculative, because nobody wrote, none of them wrote in their biography, none of them wrote autobiographies in which they said, yeah, I did what I did because I was scarred by the war. But but look, common sense tells you that we were in a different moral universe after the Civil War. Death just didn't seem as uncommon, as atrocious as maybe it once had. But I tell you, the one place where you can measure the war's impact is the incredible number of firearms that flooded America in the years immediately after the war in 1865 and 1866. Not just soldiers bringing their guns home, but the federal government auctioning and giving away 1.3 million firearms, such that open carry, which was not unheard of before the war, especially in rural areas in the South, you could see men wearing a pistol. After the war, it became commonplace. After the war, especially on the frontier, most people were wearing guns, and that was a new phenomenon. You can find memoirists in Missouri and Kansas saying, wow, everybody's wearing a gun now. that was certainly a contributing factor to the violence we saw.
Yeah, and of course you've got a lot of photographs, a lot of supplemental material in here, and pictures of them, with their.
Well, the book is, look, I would hope would appeal to anybody who's read a certain amount about the Old West, but at its base, this book is designed to appeal to somebody who's approaching this with little, as a newbie, as somebody who thinks, what actually happened out Old West might be interesting, but they're not going to go read a 500-page book on Wyatt Earp. My book, that one of the ideas was I wanted to bring everybody into one story, and it's an easy way to learn an awful lot about the Old West really fast.
Yeah, you've done a beautiful job with that. I'm curious. We talk about the old shows. Do you have a favorite Old West show?
No,
movie or anything?
It was the movies.
Yeah,
I got really my interest. Was Butch Cassidy in 1969.
Oh yeah.
It's not a crazily inaccurate movie. The westerns from then into the 70s, things my favorite western is Clint Eastwood's 1992 Unforgiven, which is kind of with Morgan Freeman and a homicidal Gene Hackman. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, that's one of my top 25 movies of all time. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. And some people call it an anti-western because it does not glorify. It makes very clear how tough gun violence was back then.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Blazing Saddles.
Well, that's certainly in the conversation.
the Waco Kid and This Is My Shooting Hand.
Yeah, Beans.
My generation, I would have to say Tombstone, the movie. Kind of missed out on the TV series, but that's one that.
The TV series were all, of course, I missed them on real TV in the 50s, but they were on reruns. All it was like, but none of them seemed real. I was never interested in the fictional West. Mm-hmm. I never read Zane Grey or any of the novels. I want to know what it was actually like.
Sure.
And Tombstone, boy, that might be my close second. That is not only a darn good movie, it is, other than the mass murder that opens it, in which the bad guys kill like an entire town full of Latinos, it's not far from accurate. After that,
look at the use of laudanum and these drugs that were so available on the market. I mean, I know that's not what we're talking about in the book, but it seemed, at least as a 9 or 10-year-old, I don't remember when it was that it
was 93.
Fairly real. Yeah, so
and you compare it against the movie that it competed against, which was the Kevin Costner Wyatt Earp, Snoresville. Oh, what a movie! Put me to sleep.
Well, we've gone into movie review, but that's okay because it is such a big part of how we understand the West was.
Exactly so.
And so that's what you have tackled so beautifully in The Gunfighters, How Texas Made the West Wild. Bryan, you were awesome. Thank you so much.
And thank
for
you.
spending time with me.
I'm flattered that you would have me back. I haven't lived in Waco since we left in 1972, but many of my parents' friends are still here. Of course, my dad was instrumental in starting Extraco Banks with the Brown family, and so Waco has always been a place that has a very, very warm spot in my heart.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Coleman.
Thank you, Ann. It's always a pleasure. Great to be here.
Good. Fun. Well, stay with us. We've got a lot more of the Ann Harder Show ahead, brought to you by The Main Event. Stay with us.
Have you ever wondered why so many pet parents are choosing to have virtual vet appointments? Online veterinary care is making it easier than ever to get expert advice for your pet. Our professionals are not only experts in managing urgent concerns, but also in providing top-notch preventative health care. We're proud to connect pet owners to a vast network of licensed veterinary professionals, ready to address any immediate concerns and expand access to pet care. Book your first appointment today.
Hi, my name's Erica, and today I'm going to be taking you through my skincare routine using the Tasmanian Spring Water range from Sand & Sky. This range is really good for dry and dehydrated skin like myself. It's packed with 2 types of hyaluronic acid and fermented sea kelp to reduce redness and irritation, which I experience daily. So that's it. It's so quick and so easy, and my skin feels so dewy and so hydrated.
Waco STEM Camp is back. This is for incoming 3rd through 6th graders, and it's free. On August 5th, from 8:30 to 3:30, 3rd and 4th graders can explore engineering, robotics, science. The next day, August 6th, it's the 5th and 6th graders' turn. This all happens at Doris Miller Community Center. To register as a camper, stop by any City of Waco community centers.
I know you're gonna love this Kodak Dot Plus printer. You guys just connect it to your smartphone, and then you're gonna use the Kodak Photo Print app. It's going to print you a 4x6 photo. I am just in awe. I love how these turned out. Also, the printer comes with a free cartridge of 10 photo sheets. I can assure you, you are going to love this printer as much as my family has. You guys have to check it out for yourself.
Mom and Dad can be a little competitive. They get all, yeah, buddy, and heck yeah. Lucky for them, Main Event has over 85 games and activities to play together, so they can get rematch after rematch after rematch. So do something awesome together.
I just got my Colgate Advanced LED Whitening Treatment in the mail, and I am very excited to have dramatically whiter teeth in just 10 days. My teeth are going to be 6 shades whiter. The treatment is enamel safe and hassle-free. It's even designed for my sensitive teeth. Let's open it up. Inside we have the blue light whitening device. It's a charger for after each treatment as well. There's a full 10-day supply, and it looks easy to apply. Order yours today at shop.colgate.com.
We're gonna do a song called Gone to Texas. It's our love song to Texas, but it's based on that Davy Crockett quote everybody knows and loves.
1, 2, 3.
Well, I've been up north to those city lights. Life ain't the same north of the Red River line. You may not understand my way of thinking or my way of life. Well, the Lone Star State is where I love, Lord, that fits me just fine. You may all go to hell, and I'll go to Texas. You may all go to hell, and I'll go home. You may all go to hell, and I'll take Texas every time. We all go to hell, and I'll go to Texas. Yeah, look that big old starry sky and those wide open spaces. The red dirt cowboys, pickup trucks, and wild country nights. A million mapped up one-door towns from the depths to Texas pines. Lone Star beer and Bob Wales music, that's the Texas way of life. You may all go to hell, and I'll go to Texas. You may all go to hell, and I'll go home. You may all go to hell, and I'll take Texas every time. You may all go to hell, and I'll go to Texas. Walk it on, girl. Watch the sunset low and the stars come out of my
God bless Texas.
Smoke Pub was created by a group of friends who share a passion for great whiskey and cocktails. Frustrated by the lack of easy-to-use cocktail smokers, we set out to design something better. Our goal was simple: make smoking cocktails quick, clean, and fun. After countless experiments, we developed Smoke Pub, the world's first electric cocktail smoker. Join us on this exciting journey and discover the magic of Smoke Pub, where unforgettable cocktails begin.
Explore unforgettable experiences with Forest Travel. Experience the pinnacle of luxury travel with our exclusive global selection. From secluded villas to elegant train voyages, each moment is tailored for sophisticated exploration. As one of the most renowned and awarded travel agencies in the world, we are pleased to elevate your next journey to an entirely new level. Your extraordinary journey begins now. Forest Travel.
When you view the glass half full, the little things become magical. Like kicking back and sharing laughs, spread good vibes, and they'll come back. Celebrate what you love with what you wear, even if what you love is kind of weird. Life is good in super soft tees that spark smiles and connectivity. 10% of profits go to help kids heal. So choose optimism and make the magic real. Visit lifeisgood.com.
The 4-burner, side-burner, side-sear burner with Clearview glass stainless steel grill from Monument Grills. Made of tempered glass, which is strong, insulated, and allows you to check your grilling without lifting the lid. Our porcelain-coated cast iron cooking grids offer a large cooking surface of 513.3 square inches, primary cooking area, with even heat cooking. The Monument Grills include LED control knobs and are easy to light with pilotless electronic ignition. Better grilling, better value, Monument Grills.
Hey, Waco, we're live in the Waco office. It's time for Waco Weekend with Debbie and Jenna.
We're back with your 2-minute guide to everything happening this Waco weekend.
First off is Food Truck Friday at the Carlin Bright Arboretum. From 8 to 5 p.m., they'll have a variety of lineup of food trucks, live music, and all the Arboretum vibes. This Friday, you can catch Trustmanos, you can catch King's Knees, and Sugar Rush Wheels. Go ahead and try it.
Then when the sun sets, head over to Route 77 Food Park for Cumbia Night. From 8 to 11, dance the night away, shop local vendors, and try something new from Taquiza's summer menu.
I love Taquiza's tacos and their flan. It's one of my favorite things.
We'll have to go try their new menu.
Yes. And then if you're feeling groovy, you can head on over to the Waco Hippodrome for the Monkey Men, which is the Monkeys tribute band, and we'll be kicking off at 7:30 p.m. It's definitely a night of nostalgia that you don't want to miss.
Then on Sunday is Go Time. The electrolyte Tri-Waco Triathlon is back in the Brazos River, kicking off at Indian Spring Park.
Well, whether you're racing or cheering on the sidelines, it's definitely a day full of energy and community.
Don't forget, you can always visit the Grapple at wacoin.com for more vlogs, features, and our full Waco Weekend wrap-up every Wednesday.
As always, tag us when you're out and about using our hashtag Waco Weekend so we can stay up to date with everything you've got going on.
And enjoy your
hashtag Waco Weekend.
All right, we're going to do probably the second nicest song we've ever written. I normally write about drinking and leaving and burning things down, but this song is called Be My Baby, and I say it's about a bottle of chocolate wine. Alyssa says it's about other things.
I don't know. It's about wine.
It's about wub.
It's about wub.
Wub.
All is well. The world's still spinning. There's water in the well. Come and see. Fish in the river. I'll make you dinner. Gas in the tank. Glide and reel in. Come along with me. We got leaves on the trees, flowers for the bees, honey for the bears, more than enough to share. I can't think of a single thing wrong. Why can't you be my baby? Why can't you be my baby? Ooh. Jack and Pope down this river. No hurry, come along with me. Come on. We got leaves on the trees, flowers for the bees, honey for the bears, more than enough to share. I can't think of a single thing wrong. Why can't you be my baby? Why can't you be my baby? Ooh. Holding hands, kissing, dancing in the kitchen, date night, moonlight, talking after midnight, Sunday morning, gotta go to church. Say I love you, baby, I love you more, love you more, yeah, yeah. Ooh, ooh. We got leaves on the trees, flowers for the bees, honey for the bears, more than enough to share. I can't think of a single thing wrong. Why can't you be my baby? Why can't you be my baby?
For 75 years, Nalgene Outdoor has been your trusted companion, fueling adventures and helping protect the planet. We're committed to reducing waste, improving access to clean water, and providing simple, safe, and sustainable products for you and your family. No gimmicks, just durable, well-designed bottles built to last. Join us on our mission to amplify life, not complicate it. Because at Nalgene, what goes into our bottles matters as much as the adventures they fuel. Explore more at nalgene.com. That's NALGENE.com.
Thanks for being with us. Tomorrow, we hear from Robert Gager and Shepherd's Heart about the great work they're doing to feed the hungry. And we'll have music from Rodney Pyatt. Have a great day.